What's going on, Buff Nation? Welcome back to another video. So, some big time things have happened today. Big time recruit linebacker now added to the room. Where does that put the linebacker room now for the Buffs? Then some Heisman talk. Obviously, the odds came out. I think a lot of people are scratching their heads. We're going to talk about that, give you my thoughts and opinions about it. Vegas rarely misses, but could they be wrong on this one? Some recruiting intel. Seems like the Buffs and Coach Prime have adjusted their strategy just a bit. I'll give you my thoughts on that. And Reese Davis gives his thoughts and opinions about Coach Prime and how he's been handling himself in the transfer portal and just this entire season thus far. Before we do that, smash the like button, subscribe, and roll the intro. That might have been a little loud. That was ramped up. I apologize if I blew your eardrum out. But let's get right back into it. So like we said, big time commit. Mouthful here. Ready? Johnny Chainsaw Chaney Jr. There we go. From FAMU, committed today, which is now the 9th inside linebacker that's going to be added to this class alongside Levante Bentley, Jeremiah Brown, Brendan Grant, Trevor Woods, Keaton Wade, obviously Green Hill. Obviously, Green Hill was the other one that was added. There was talks about Herring, the linebacker from Tennessee. We mentioned on the previous show that he has moved on. So this seems to be the filler for that linebacker that they were targeting. Could we see some more through this? Again, nobody else can enter into the portal, but you're still able to bring guys in from the portal that are basically floating around. So it will be something to keep an eye on if the Buffs were to bring any more in. With this addition, it brings them to 78 scholarships. Again, 85 is kind of that magic number. So something definitely we're going to be monitoring over the next few months here. And this is why I think the recruiting strategy might be adjusting just a touch, and we'll get into that here shortly. But let's talk about the commit here in Johnny Chaney Jr. Headed into his senior year. You could see his progression over the last 3 years. Ranked 310th at linebacker. Again, nothing that's going to really knock you off your socks, but 6'2", 230, great size to him here, and I think he's going to make it a huge addition. And again, depth has been a big question mark to this linebacker room, so I love this depth piece. And look, these older guys kind of playing that last little hoorah could have a big impact and play a big factor into the team headed into next season. So a lot of unknowns going into this next season, I would say, just given the fact of how much more talent was added this transfer cycle. So it will be something to keep an eye on, again, if there is any more. And once we start getting some more of these summer practices and leading up to the season in August, we'll definitely get a better feel of where the starting positions are going to be. It's going to be exciting. I'm ready for this to rock and roll. I feel like May, we're in this weird limbo stage. June is when you start kind of having some big-time visits. So that'll be something that we definitely monitor to see how are the visits going compared to last year, and they're going to make some adjustments. Again, the portal, it's so unknown. It's still, even though it's not as new, it's still a new thing that you're trying to navigate through. So it will be interesting. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about the Heisman odds here. Okay, this is an interesting one. This isn't obviously all the Heisman odds. I gave you kind of just like a little bit of a small touch of it. Okay, Carson Beck ranked number 1 plus 750, the odds to win the Heisman. I love this. Carson Beck wasn't even in the top 5. I don't think he was even invited or a Heisman finalist last year, which I was scratching my head because last year he finished with 3,900 yards, 24 touchdowns, and an 86 QBR. Doesn't even get an invite. Yet Jordan Travis does with 2,700 yards. That's besides the point. Maybe it was because he was a sophomore, which we know there has been a sophomore winner in Tim Tebow, so it's not like they can't be invited. Really scratching my head on this one. Carson Beck really, I think, impressed a lot of people, including myself, and this is no shocker, in my opinion, that he is ranked number 1. Now, this is where things get a little sideways, and he's not the only one. Garrett Nussmeier. So, who is that? Great question. Garrett Nussmeier is not a nobody, but coming into his first year, sitting behind Jaden Daniels, kind of like what Carson Beck was to Stetson Bennett. Obviously, we know what Carson Beck did last year, so makes a little bit of sense, but plus 1,800 and above him, which I don't have obviously listed here, but it is very interesting to me, and I am not sold on this young man whatsoever, is Nico Lamavia, I believe is how it's pronounced. I probably butchered it. The sophomore, the redshirt freshman at Tennessee. Didn't really have much great quarterback play last year. The last 2 years, it's been okay. Nothing really knocking your socks off, but they are extremely high on this kid. Obviously, his little brother Colorado has been kind of targeting him and working with him, so I know there's talent in that family. But for him to be at a plus 1,500, the reason why I'm kind of speaking to this is because look who he's well ahead of. You can see the ranks here with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter at plus 4,000 and plus 6,500 for Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, which is extremely low in the rankings. Again, 20th. So there's 20 people they feel are more favored to win the Heisman than those two guys. And just to kind of give you a perspective here, again, Shador Sanders threw for 3,200 yards last year. Carson threw for 39. Carson threw 24 touchdowns, and Shador threw 27 touchdowns with only 3 interceptions to Carson's 26. Now, the reason I gave you those things because we just talked with Carson Beck should have been in the conversation. Clearly is the clear favorite right now. Now, QBR was a big factor. Shador Sanders' QBR was a 63.1, so I'm not saying that Shador should be the number one favorite. However, I just feel like it's a little bit of a shot there, a little across the bow there. Travis Hunter, the way that he plays both sides of the ball and is an instant impactor, his injuries I think maybe kind of brought down that stock a little bit, but surprisingly, I'm a little shocked here. I got to be honest. Look, I know a big factor to this is going to be how the O-line holds up. I don't think they believe this O-line and the reconstruction of it will allow him to do these things that I think we know Shador and Travis can do. Because after game 3, game 4, there was a clear, these two guys could be in the conversation if this is the pace they keep up, if they maintain it. They didn't maintain it, and look, for multiple reasons, but obviously everything that was done and changed this offseason are all to be able to maintain what game 1 through 3 is what we saw. And so, I understand a little bit of the rankings. There's people in front of them, I guess, that is where my head's a scratcher. Okay, that's where my head's kind of in a whirlwind. Cameron Ward, first year at Miami, played at Oregon State last year, very, very familiar. The Pac-12 is very familiar with, and the Buffs should be with Cameron Ward. I'm not always a huge guy of somebody playing in that first year in that system. Will Howard, a young quarterback. Dylan Gabriel, I don't hate this. Going from Oklahoma, had a great year at Oklahoma, headed to Oregon with obviously Dan Lanning. Quinn Ewers is the second favorite. Love Quinn Ewers. Think he played extremely good football last year. Connor Wingman, quarterback for Texas A&M, plus 2,200. These guys I have a lot of question marks for. Riley Leonard was Duke quarterback last year. He's playing for a new school this year. I understand the things they did last year, but they're all playing for a new coach. They're all playing for a new system. There's going to be some growing pains, in my opinion, and that's where I have a little bit of question on the rank for mainly Shador Sanders. I think Travis Hunter, due to his injuries and the back and forth, that I think there's going to be hopefully a more organized balance of how he's utilized to really showcase what Travis Hunter is. Also, too, there's an article where Pete Thamel said he spoke to a few NFL directs about Shador Sanders and his, where they feel he would go, because there were some thoughts that he could go into the draft this year. So NFL scouts were looking at him and possibly coming to the NFL. Has a high potential, thinks he's definitely going to go first round. So all those things don't necessarily add up. But look, time will tell. These are all just pre-rankings, but it definitely, I think, turned a lot of heads because early on, again, before Vegas got involved, when they had kind of your pre-article, Shador Sanders, I believe, was in the top 5, maybe top 10 for Heisman favorites, and I felt like that was more of a reasonable place for him to be at. This, in my opinion, seems a bit low. Love to get your thoughts in the comments. Maybe I'm overreaching. I know there's going to be the haters, which it blows my mind. They continue to click on the video. Like, you don't have to click. If you don't like the stuff, if you don't like what I'm saying, like, you clearly hate the team in the process. You're okay. You just don't scoot past it. I mean, I don't mind it. I appreciate the view, but it's crazy to me. Like, you're just yelling at yourself at this point. Let's talk about some recruiting. So these two young men here seem to be having some great conversations with Colorado. Brian Lewis, the running back, says he can see himself playing at Colorado, has visited multiple times on unofficial visits from Florida. So it will be interesting to see, again, a top running back. You can see here his size is 6'205". Currently, Florida State leads the way, followed by Miami. Again, with Florida guys, you expect those things. And to have something like this, a big-time talent in Colorado this early on for multiple visits, you got to be able to believe there's a lot of interest there. And again, I'm interested to see how this offseason will go and how many visits will be there and the amount of talent will be there. We know of the process, the 40-40-20 rule, where recruiting hasn't been much of a factor, but I think I think that number's got to adjust a little bit. I like what Colorado and Coach Prime is doing. I think it's beneficial to their program, but I think you're starting to see a depth issue here with these guys hopping in and out, and you've got to try to get these guys early if you can. It's not going to be easy. And then Cornell, I believe, Jr. said they visited this past weekend, currently a wide receiver. Look, I mean, wide receivers have shown out at Colorado, and I think with Julian Lewis possibly coming in with the line they're building, wide receivers are going to be a hot commodity for the Buffs and something that they definitely need to keep an eye on. So he said him and his father had a great conversation this weekend, and definitely something worth to keep an eye on. So again, this next few months, I'm going to be heavily watching this and discussing it, getting your thoughts about it in the comment as well, because it will be interesting to see if there is a little bit of adjustment to the recruiting cycle. Again, give me your thoughts on that, how you feel. So Reese Davis had his thoughts on Coach Prime's first year. Reese Davis, face of college football on game day Saturday. I love him to death. I think he's just perfect in the way that he describes things. So he had his thoughts on the portal exodus that Colorado's been dealing with. And this is what he said, quote, "The way guys are dismissed or encouraged to move on, there are a lot of different ways to do it. This is not new. This is not something Deion Sanders invented to send players moving on. This has happened since the beginning of time. Coaches do this. Are there ways that don't offend the sensibilities of the public as much? Sure. But I noticed that one of the players said that he didn't sugarcoat, but he just told you the way it is. I pointed this out several times on the podcast. Deion ain't hard to find. He also ain't easy to play for because he's a tough dude. He's a hard-nosed, old-school Mickey Andrews, a former Florida State assistant disciple. He's a tough guy, so he's not going to be easy to play for." And this is something we've kind of iterated on the show a handful of times of it's just the process. And look, I've actually had multiple conversations about this with a lot of people because it is interesting to watch people. Hey, what's your thoughts on Deion? I've got other friends today just because he's such a polarizing factor. They know my personality. They know that I enjoy it. Hence why, I enjoy doing this show because I like the way that he carries himself. I love the swagger. I've always been a big fan of it. That's why, I watch this. I follow along with it. But I also, the reason why I love it because my personality is similar to that. I rub a lot of people the wrong way. So I relate to it because people don't like when you're moving a certain kind of way, when you got a kind of a swagger and a cockiness about you. And I think there is ways I've learned myself as I've gotten older. You got to handle it better at times in certain situations. And sometimes after the fact, I probably could have toned that down a little bit. But when guns are blazing and guns are firing back at you, sometimes, you just fire off the hip a couple times and maybe hit a stray. That's just how it works. But ultimately, the main thing that I love, and I've said it on this time and time again, I believe what he says is what you get. What you see is what you get. And there is no sugarcoating. If you ain't good enough, you ain't good enough. I don't have time to baby you, to love you, to hug you, to carry you. But to tell you how it is, it's not working out. Let's move on. Let's keep it going. I handle my relationships that way. Again, it doesn't always fit for everybody. My opinion, the only difference is from him for any other coaches is the fact of social media, and because they put everything out there for everyone to see. It's the cost of it, right? There's a lot of pros that come with it, but these are some of the cons. So it's just part of it. It's always going to be in the news. But as I say, all publicity is good publicity. And if you think about it, no matter what's happening, you're constantly hearing about Coach Prime. You're constantly hearing about the Buffs. Whether it's good, bad, people bickering, arguing, at the end of the day, once the dust settles, all that you remember is Coach Prime's at Colorado, and it feels like they're doing something special. All the other noise will eventually float away. Some people may not like it, but it is what it is. And I think he had a great take on it. Reese Davis did. So it was interesting to hear him say that. And again, we've been saying it ourselves, but it's always reassuring when you hear somebody kind of from the clouds come in and give their thought and perspective. Because I always get labeled of just love it on Deion. Don't have a true opinion about it. It's no, look, I think about it. I sit back and relax. And now there's obviously other people that are looking from the outside having somewhat of a similar opinion about it. Hope you guys enjoyed the show today. Again, it's been a little bit, but we are back. We're rocking and rolling. So you know what to do. Be sure to smash the like button, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts on all these things. I know some of you have already probably written a paragraph of how dumb I am, and those are always appreciated as well, too. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace and love, baby.